Hello everyone, and welcome to Hill Street. Today's story is My Grandpa and I Switched Lives by Mr. Purple T-Rex. If you end up enjoying this story, please leave a like. And if you enjoy hearing stories from me, please subscribe and become a resident of Hill Street and let me know how I'm doing in the comments. Now, let's get to this nightmare. I'm writing this story with only a few days left before I leave to live on my own in a house I never owned. I can feel my old brittle fingers weakening with every letter I type, but here goes nothing. Now for starters, you gotta be willing to believe in anything to understand my story. It all started about 2 weeks ago. My grandpa made a request to me over the phone that we visit together for just a week. He was old and didn't have much life in him. With all the heart problems he had, I had no choice but to make plans for us to be together. I decided to make plans for the following week for my wife and my only son to go to my mother-in-law's, while my grandpa and I stayed together at home. My grandpa was a simple man who didn't like traveling, so for us to stay at my secluded house was probably the best scenario for him. I called my work and made plans so that I didn't work all of next week. With those two obstacles out of the way, the only thing I had left to do was to drive out to my grandpa's place and bring him to my home. When I got there, I saw his small house with daisies in the front yard. They used to be my grandmother's favorite. I decided to honk the horn over knocking on the door. I did this several times until I saw the old man waddle out of his house with absolutely no luggage. When he sat down, he looked over at me with his twinkling blue eyes, a heartwarming smile, and short, straight, gray hair on his head. Before words could be spoken, he handed me a necklace. He was wearing almost the exact same one. I instinctively took it and put it around my neck. I hadn't seen my grandpa for at least 5 years. I could feel myself starting to tear up. He reached over, touched my short, curly hair, and looked deeply into my brown eyes. I saw him wet his lips before he said, "I missed you." I responded with, "I missed you too." I then started driving back home. On the way back, all he did was ask about every little detail of my life. He asked about my favorite color, what time I usually get up, and random little things. I answered all of them as best as I could, and as truthfully as I could. The entire drive felt like a small curious child was attempting to pick every little detail of my life apart. When we finally arrived, he shambled to my door alongside me and watched me unlock the door. I saw my grandfather's blue eyes light up as he moseyed around my house. We both then sat on the couch. He talked about war stories. He personally was not in the military, but my great-great-grandfather was. Nearing the end of his life, however, he went mad and was put in an asylum. This wasn't uncommon for my grandfather's side of the family. Every other generation went into an insane asylum once they reached their elderly state. I continued listening to his stories. It almost seemed as if he was there, with how detailed he was. He then talked about times when lights weren't invented. Whenever my grandpa went on these history tangents, I always assumed he was into reading history books. I always half expected him to start talking about the Stone Age and dinosaurs. He went on and on with his talking until he started falling asleep. I got up before I left for my bed. I decided to inspect his necklace. I noticed that the necklace had a few minor differences. His necklace looked bigger and had a few more details, making his look superior to mine. But I didn't mind. The necklace was a special gift, and I didn't plan to take my necklace off at all. When I woke up in the morning, my grandfather was staring at me by the end of my bed. I looked back at him with a puzzled stare and asked what he was doing. He didn't say a word. He just continued staring. I decided to shake it off. I walked downstairs with a bit of a cramp in my back. I can feel myself getting too lazy for these stairs, or too old. Once I got down there, I made breakfast. I watched my grandfather insert his fake teeth before we started eating. I noticed his gray straight hairs were starting to curl a little. It was a minor detail, but it's something you notice. It was weird, but who was I to question it? Once we finished breakfast, we went outside for a walk. While we were walking, he suddenly started to complain about chest pain. I quickly dialed 911, and I watched as the ambulance took him to the hospital. I wasn't able to see him again that day, so I went home. When night fell, I went upstairs to brush my teeth. As I did, my teeth started falling out. Blood gushed out of my mouth. My teeth fell down the drain along with the blood. In a panic, I grabbed a few before they fell and put them in a baggie. I kept telling myself it was a dream. I then forced myself to sleep that night. I started having dreams about war and older times. The dreams were bizarre and felt more like memories. When I awoke, my teeth were still missing. I then decided to buy dentures. I didn't want my grandpa to know anything about this. The next day, I went to the hospital to visit my grandpa. He didn't say much while he was there. He just appeared relieved to see me. His eyes were darker than I last remembered, most likely because of the heart attack and hospital time. He stayed there for 3 days. When he got out, I noticed his skin was smoother and his walk was balanced. When we got home, I noticed his hair was more brown than gray. When we got out of the car, I noticed he swiped my keys. I quickly stumbled beside him as he unlocked the door to my house. I waddled in, glaring at him, but that's when I noticed I was looking at my reflection, standing tall beside me. He smiled at me with my smile. This was no longer my grandpa. He is now me. He noticed the shock on my face and then said with a slow, deep voice, "Nobody will believe you." He then gestured to the couch, and I followed him. I looked over at him in disbelief. He stared silently at the wall. After a few minutes, he spoke. He just said, "Obviously, I'm not your grandfather. I put him in an asylum, just like I'll do to you if you tell anyone about this." Nonetheless, I did a good job raising his son. You see, I've been doing this for a long time. Once I get too old, I take one of my grandchildren. I always let them have a child first. If they're stubborn, I take their sperm or get them pregnant through any means necessary. I'm too old to have children of my own anymore. He chuckled. I'm joking. I could totally have my own kids unlike you. All I could do was stare as he talked. I realized how he took my youth. I realized it a long time ago. I ripped the necklace off me. He stared silently at me, started laughing, and at that moment, I ripped his necklace off. His look turned sour towards me as he arose from the couch. He then laughed again. He then asked if I wanted a box of them. I stood in awe as I realized that there was nothing I could do. I then felt a sharp pain, then I collapsed. He handed me pills and said, "Take them. It makes living life bearable." I realized these were his prescriptions. He then walked upstairs and went to bed. As he walked up the stairs, he said, "Your grandchildren will be home soon tomorrow. We can talk more later." As soon as he left, I got up and went on the computer and did some research on my family. I realized when any of my great-grandparents went into the asylum, it was because they claimed to be younger or a different person. So now, I sit at my computer desk. I've decided I'm going to go with it. I have no choice. I want to see my child grow and see my grandchildren. But knowing that one of them will have their life taken away will bring tears to my eyes. I plan on stopping him next time. I won't let this happen again, unless I die from my newly acquired heart problems. I'll do my best to make sure he pays. I'll avenge myself and all my grandparents. I just need to wait.